Breaking this morning, the FBI says it's investigating another attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. The latest happening at his Florida golf course, where investigators say the suspect hid in bushes about 400 yards away from Mr. Trump. Authorities say the suspect had an assault-style rifle with a scope and these two backpacks.
Former President Donald Trump is safe and unharmed. The U.S. Secret Service personnel opened fire on a gunman located near the property line, and this matter is under investigation.
Police arrested 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth. Court records show he has a long criminal record and is now facing federal charges. In the aftermath, the former president praised law enforcement for keeping him safe. Well, his 2024 opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, condemned political violence and is urging all Americans to do their part to make sure that this incident does not lead to others. Good morning. Good to have you with us on a busy Monday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Christine Romans in for Savannah. From Florida to Washington, we have team coverage of the investigation and the fallout. We begin with NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirch in West Palm Beach, Florida. Good morning there. So, Jesse, walk us through how this whole incident unfolded on Sunday.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. So it was yesterday afternoon, according to officials, that former President Donald Trump was golfing here. According to a source familiar, the president was between the 5th and 6th holes. And as officials described at a press conference, there's an agent who walks ahead of the former president, goes ahead of the former president on the golf course and scouts the area in front of where he is playing. And during that searching of the area ahead of the former president reaching the specific part of the golf course where this unfolded, according to officials, the Secret Service agent spotted a rifle sticking through the bushes toward the golf course. And according to the U.S. Secret Service, agents opened fire. It's not clear if anyone returned fire. And then fast forward, and someone is seen, according to officials, fleeing through the bushes and fleeing the area. And according to officials, a witness captured a photo of a getaway vehicle. The information, including the license plate of that vehicle, was then used, sent out to authorities all over the area. And in a neighboring county, Martin County, you can see an image of it there, authorities were able to make a traffic stop and take someone into custody who has now been identified by sources as Ryan Wesley Ruth, 58 years old, according to 3 senior law enforcement officials. And so this ended with someone in custody. But again, and that's the image of the person who who sources tell us is in custody, but he has not been named officially as a suspect by officials at a press conference yet, guys.
So, Jesse, what more are we learning about this suspect who's now in custody and just how the investigation moves forward from here?
Yes, still a lot of questions unanswered, of course, and those are the images that we've been shown from the scene of what was found there: an AR-style rifle, ceramic plates in backpacks. You can see the setup there along the fence line, and that is right in the area where I am right now. So what we know is that Ryan Wesley Ruth has a conviction for possession of a machine gun in 2022. There appears to be an extensive criminal history for this man, and he had previously told news outlets that he had traveled to Ukraine to help the war effort over there. And the state's attorney's office now tells us, guys, in Palm Beach County, that the case is being turned over to the federal government, that the Department of Justice will be filing charges. So we'll be keeping an eye out for any potential court appearance, possibly even today in the days ahead. So, again, a lot of unanswered questions. But I just want to stress again, if you come back to our live shot here, you can see behind me here the bushes. So this is the entrance to the golf club. The intersection that has been heavily blocked off is down that way. But I can tell you, this is a main road. It's not like there are homes that you could just be walking by. The bushes are very high. They're very thick. I can't see into the golf club as we've been driving around the area. So it's clear that someone would have had to have gotten through a heavy amount of bushes. And one of the questions I have and would be asking at a press conference is if anyone had eyes on this person getting into the bushes, because even that seems to have been something that would have required a good amount of effort, guys.
And, Jesse, what has been the reaction from Mr. Trump and his campaign?
Yeah, so we've heard from the former president himself now. He posted on social media, said he described it as an interesting day, a moment of levity there. He thanked law enforcement for what they did, and he referred to the job done by law enforcement responding as, quote, absolutely outstanding. He said he's very proud to be an American, and we'll be looking for any more reaction from the former president today.
All right, Jesse, thanks so much.
Jesse mentioned Martin County, and we are joined now by the Martin County Sheriff William D. Snyder, which is just north of Palm Beach. It's where the suspect was taken into custody a short time after this incident at the golf club. Sheriff, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I mean, first, let's just talk about how this all unfolded. We know an eyewitness spotted the suspect who was fleeing from bushes outside the Trump golf course. Someone took photos of his car. That led to an alert being issued by law enforcement. Just walk us through what happened from that point on and just how valuable that information from the eyewitness was to help you make this arrest.
Well, sure. The eyewitness really makes this whole thing possible. We got the information from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. It was seamlessly transmitted to us. We understood from them that there'd been an assassination attempt on the President of the United States, former President Trump, and that their vehicle was possibly heading our way. We mobilized our whole sheriff's office. We had a bomb team on standby, helicopters going airborne, and we deployed to the interstate. Fortunately, one of my road patrol deputies at one of the exits did see the vehicle and began following it until ultimately we have large trucks with push bumpers. We were able to maneuver that vehicle off the interstate without a chase, and then using a felony stop, what we call a felony stop, get the suspect out of the vehicle and into custody.
Can you give us a sense about how much time passed between getting that BOLO, that be on the lookout notification, and when the suspect was then taken into custody?
Yes, we got the BOLO initially from Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office at about 1:55, and within 15 minutes, we picked that vehicle up. We're the north border county to Palm Beach County, so when Rick Bradshaw's team let us know the suspect might be heading this way, at 15 minutes tops.
So it all happened very quickly, and it all happened, by the way, on I-95, which is a very, very busy highway for folks who aren't familiar with it. Explain how you went about making this arrest in such a busy highway.
Well, it took good police work. I have a phenomenal road patrol section. We're known as the hashtag wrong exit county. You can't leave South Florida without going through Martin County, and we're a choke point. So we have a lot of experience stopping cars at high speeds on I-95. As soon as we saw the vehicle, we shut everything down south of where that vehicle was. So really, our primary goal was to prevent collateral damage. We know we already had somebody try to kill the highest value target on the planet, and that we took it very seriously. We had a green light. Had that suspect made the mistake of trying to run from us or producing a firearm, you'd be asking me how many times we shot him this morning.
Whoa. What were your deputies' interactions like with the suspect as he was being taken into custody?
Well, they were very careful. Of course, we did what you've seen on TV 100 times, a felony stop. Order him out of the vehicle at gunpoint. We had SWAT team on route, and a couple of my SWAT team boys were there already. They had him at rifle point, get out of the vehicle, on his knees, interlock his hands. You've seen it before, and then take him into custody. I arrived a moment later, and I would describe his demeanor as very calm. He seemed to have a very bland facial affect, didn't seem perturbed or disturbed by what was going on. I mean, we had a helicopter overhead, men with rifles and blue lights, and the interstate shut down. He was just as calm as if he was going for a picnic after church.
Anything he say at that point?
No, he made no comment, and of course we were very careful. We knew this would be an FBI investigation, and we certainly didn't want to cross over into their case. Our job was to get him in custody and hold on to him until the federal authorities arrived a very short time later.
It's just remarkable it was only 15 minutes from the BOLO to the time you had him in your hands. Is that surprising to you, how quickly this went? Or seems like everything just went exactly to plan?
No, I live near the interstate, and when I heard the call and heard he might be coming my way, I just sat down after church for a little snack, As soon as I knew he was coming this way, I said, there's no snack for me. And sure enough, within moments, my guys had sighted the vehicle, and then I've described to you what happened after that.
Quick work. All right, Sheriff William D. Snyder, thank you so much. Let's continue this conversation with Rob D'Amico. He's the founder of Sierra One Consulting and a former member of the FBI's hostage rescue team. Rob, thanks for joining us this morning. How surprised are you to see something like this happen again so soon after the attempted assassination attempt on Mr. Trump back in Pennsylvania in July? Only 9 weeks.
Yeah, I was absolutely. I was watching all my football games, and when I started getting the text coming in, and when I saw the gunfire, I thought, because the neighborhood surrounding the Trump golf course, I thought maybe there was gunfire in the area and it was overheard and the Secret Service reacted to it. And then word started getting in what was going on. And I was absolutely floored that this soon after another assassination attempt, and a fairly accurately planned one. I think the Secret Service agent that shot at him interrupted him. I think he was waiting. He was probably scoping out his rifle, looking what field of vision he had, and then picking a point that when Trump walked into it that he was going to engage. And I think the Secret Service agent in front of him saw the rifle barrel. And I do think if Pennsylvania hadn't happened, he might not have taken a shot. He might have investigated it, but I don't think he would have taken a shot. I think the complacency that was with some of these events before was really taken away and from Pennsylvania, saying, hey, this can happen. It did happen. And he took the absolutely right action.
So we now have a suspect in custody. We just heard how that all unfolded a moment ago. What's the FBI's priority right now in the early stages of this investigation?
The first one was always to make sure that this wasn't a conspiracy and other people involved. So they're going to start, again, the search warrants for all the electronic devices, his phone, his laptops, his computer, his home. That's all going to go out. And then the investigators are going to start looking at if there's a connection, did someone help them? Also, the Secret Service is going to start looking at, did he post something that may have led them to see this beforehand? Looking at the social media, it's really tough. But I think what we're going to see in some of these is he's probably using encrypted apps. And that's one of the blind sides with the government. I'm working with a software company now to capture those encrypted apps legally so that we can start tracking this, because Discord and WhatsApp and Telegram, they're all talking about these things. And the government right now does not have that solution to grab those encrypted apps. So I think that's where we're going to start seeing this. He was talking to people probably on platforms that were outside the U.S. and encrypted.
Rob, when you look at the details that have been released so far, we've got information about the gun and the scope, the GoPro camera, a ceramic tile in backpacks hung on the fence, perhaps maybe as some kind of a shield. Does this strike you as sophisticated, this plot against the former president?
I wouldn't say sophisticated. I would say he was planning. I think all these active shooters have a vision of how this is going to go in their head. He was going to put the plate on. He had the camera. He wanted to capture this. I think he thought there was going to be a shootout, and he was interrupted. But when you look at it as a former sniper, you never stick your weapon past the bushes or the window, because it does exactly what the Secret Service saw. There's a straight line that's easily not seen as a branch. It's too straight. And then he saw the optics. So, I mean, I even taught my son when he was little with his Nerf gun, you always sit back from that. And that's a sniper's technique. So I don't think sophisticated in tactics. I think it was well planned out. And I think they're going to start looking at some cellular data, maybe even some commercial ID data. Was he down there before? So did he scope this out before and then pick the day to go out and do this? Or was it, hey, he's playing golf and it was more ad hoc? But I think you're going to see that he probably planned it out. He probably drove down there a few times. He might have got into the woods without a weapon to see if anything happened. So I think he definitely reconned this for the day that he picked.
Well, you know, golf courses are wide open spaces with lots of natural cover, camouflage. Do you think the Secret Service is going to have to reevaluate how they protect the former president on the course, or even let him golf at all?
Absolutely. You never want to say, hey, you can't do something, because then they win. And I don't think President Trump's going to allow that either. But I think they're really going to have to start increasing his resources on his security detail. And they're going to have to really start taking a look how they're doing it. Again, golf courses are terrible because of the wood line and then openness. So you have that ability to hide somewhere and then have a clear shot for probably, a couple hundred yards across a fairway or a green or something. It's one of the worst places that you can look at, securing. The only thing that would be different if there's a high ground around it, as we saw in Pennsylvania, that'd make it about 2 times worse. But it is one of the toughest, and they're going to have to take a look at it. They're going to probably have to bring some technology in, maybe some drones flying ahead, type of thing to look at it. So I think they're definitely going to go more resources.
Rob D'Amico, thank you so much.
For more now, let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Ali Rafa. Ali, good morning to you. What are we hearing from President Biden now about this apparent assassination attempt?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Well, remember, it was just 2 months ago that we saw President Biden deliver that address to the American people from the Oval Office after that first assassination attempt against former President Trump, in which he condemned political violence and called for the political temperature in this country to go down. And he repeated that sentiment in a statement reacting to this news yesterday, saying, quote, "There is no place for political violence or any violence ever in our country." He said that he's directed his team to continue to ensure that the Secret Service has every resource, capability, and measure necessary to ensure the former president's safety. And he also added that he's, quote, relieved that the former president is okay, and emphasized that there is an active investigation into what happened yesterday, guys.
We're now exactly 50 days from the election. How is his rival for the presidency, Vice President Harris, reacting to the incident this morning?
Yeah, and definitely more attention on campaign trail travel and how the Secret Service is going to keep these candidates safe. The vice president, for her part, reacting to this in a post on X yesterday, saying she's been briefed on the apparent assassination attempt and that she's glad the former president is safe. She added that she's deeply disturbed by this news, saying, quote, "As we gather the facts, I will be clear. I condemn political violence," saying that we all must do our part to ensure that this incident doesn't lead to more violence. And her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, also shared that sentiment in the wake of this news. The vice president also repeating what President Biden said, that there will be an effort to make sure that the Secret Service has every resource available to them to ensure that the former president is safe, you guys.
Ali, this is once again putting the Secret Service in the spotlight, especially after all the criticism 2 months ago. We know there has been a bigger presence for Mr. Trump, especially at campaign events. So what should we know about the Secret Service detail when a former president, in this case one who's a nominee, is out in public as a private citizen?
Absolutely. This is raising even more concerns, considering the fact that for the second time in 2 months, a gunman was able to get this close to the former president. And as you mentioned, after security had already been boosted in the wake of that rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, where this first assassination attempt happened. Now, as far as what we know about the security apparatus around the former president, my colleague Kelly O'Donnell is reporting that an official tells her that this golf outing was considered an off-the-record protectee movement as opposed to a planned event. And what that entails as far as the security around former President Trump was that he had a counter-assault team, counter-surveillance team, a counter-sniper team, as well as protective intelligence units and drone contingents, in addition to his regular personal detail of Secret Service agents. So with that level of security, it's really raising new concerns, new questions on how this was able to happen and what has to change in order for this not to happen again. We know that the acting Secret Service director is on the ground in South Florida today. He's going to be meeting with local and federal law enforcement officials. And we also know that there is an effort to have a sit down with the former president himself, but that hasn't been locked in yet, you guys.
All right, Ali, thanks so much.
Time now for your morning news now weather. Millions are waking up to flood alerts across the Carolinas this morning.
Meteorologist Violetta Yes is tracking the potential storm threat for us. Good morning, Violetta.
Good morning, guys. Yes, we're keeping a very close eye on this area. You can see our flood watches in effect for eastern North Carolina and also parts of eastern South Carolina as well, with the most intense flooding likely here from just north of Myrtle Beach up through the Wilmington area and extending inland. Now, a brief overscope here of the tropics. We still have tropical depression depression Gordon really hanging by a thread at this point. We are, of course, here locally much more concerned with potential tropical cyclone number 8 that is sitting offshore of the Carolinas, about 95 miles to the east-southeast of Charleston. Winds have ticked up a little bit this morning, up to 50 miles per hour. Time is sort of running out here for this to intensify into a tropical storm, but there still is that potential here through the course of the next couple of hours. Nonetheless, we do already have those tropical storm warnings in effect from Morehead City all the way down through Charleston. This, of course, includes Myrtle Beach as well. So we're going to be dealing with the heavy rain, the strong winds, and the dangerous beach conditions as well. Peak wind gusts approaching about 60 miles per hour in places like Myrtle Beach. And you can see strong wind gusts there across eastern South Carolina as well. And, of course, the strong winds will also present those issues with storm surge as well. So these are going to be very typical impacts of tropical storms, even if it doesn't manage to technically intensify just this last little bit here over the next couple of hours. And then, of course, we're going to be dealing with that rain, the strongest rain, or heaviest rain, rather, across eastern North Carolina, down into South Carolina, general 2 to 4 inches. That extending inland locally, we could be looking at up to 6 inches. So flooding, of course, is going to be the big concern there, centered across the Carolinas as this moves onshore today. Eventually, we'll see that moisture spread to the north and west, and we'll see that focus shift into the mid-Atlantic. So maybe places like Virginia, up into parts of Maryland. And this is actually going to bring some rain into the northeast as well. We've really enjoyed some really nice weather as of late. Of course, all good things must come to an end. And this is likely going to be our next rainmaker as well, in a much more weakened state by the time Wednesday rolls around.
I'd almost forgotten it rained here.
Yes, exactly. Good for the plants, though. Nice to see you.
Appreciate it.
All right, coming up, Titan investigation this morning. The Coast Guard will begin a 2-week hearing on the deadly submersible implosion at the site of the Titanic. The big questions the investigation hopes to answer, and the key names we won't be hearing from.
But first, on the clock, the fight over the fate of TikTok heads to the courtroom. Our Danny Savalos is here to help us dig into the battle that has left the popular app in legal limbo. That's next.
All right, later today, TikTok, its parent company, and a group of content creators will face off with the U.S. Department of Justice in federal court as part of a lawsuit trying to stop a nationwide ban on the Chinese-backed social media platform. That ban's had to take effect on January 19th.
A 3-judge panel has to decide whether a ban violates the First Amendment by imposing a ban on free speech. Also at issue, whether TikTok poses a threat to national security. In April, President Biden signed the controversial law. It would require TikTok's Chinese-based parent company, ByteDance, to divest the social media company by that January deadline or be forced to shut down.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now with more on this. Danny, good morning. The DOJ's biggest argument here is that TikTok poses a national security threat, right? Because of the data it collects and the idea that China could demand to see that data. But there's stuff we're not going to see here in this courtroom. How rare is it that some of this evidence is going to be under lock and key? Only the prosecutors and the judge can see it. The rest of us won't be able to see it.
Yeah, and this is TikTok complaining that they themselves have not been able to see it, nor have their experts and people submitting declarations on their behalf. And that's the argument that they make, that the government is essentially saying, well, we have these national security reasons that are so compelling that they override First Amendment and other constitutional protections. And when TikTok says, well, what are they? The government says, well, here they are on this paper. We've blotted out everything that you would want to see. But trust us, behind that black mark on that piece of paper is something that is really important to national security.
So what does TikTok do in this situation if you don't fully know what you're being accused of? How do you make a strong argument?
That's the argument. Essentially, they're arguing that by failing to give us this information, the government has not met its burden. And, we talk about the First Amendment, and TikTok is arguing that not only as a company they have First Amendment rights, irrespective of whether they're owned by a foreign or they're chartered in a foreign country, doesn't matter. And they also are asserting the First Amendment rights of their users. And they're also asserting something that I think we should keep our eye on. They're claiming this is essentially a bill of attainder. Now, going back to your civics class and constitutional law, bill of attainder is something that we wanted to get away from in America. It's the idea that our legislative body, Congress, might just get together and say, we are passing a statute that Joe is guilty. That is something that we wanted to avoid because that is legislative punishment. And it does feel like this statute, this congressional act, is singling out TikTok and ByteDance. They're saying we are focusing on you specifically. So they may have a good argument there in addition to their First Amendment concerns.
You know, and we've got an election 50 days from now, right? As we get closer to the election, both of these candidates are using TikTok to reach a lot of potential voters. This is what the campaigns are using, especially to reach young voters. How could that affect the judges here and their likelihood to implement a ban?
The clock is ticking. ByteDance has asked the court essentially to speed it up because if all goes forward as planned, this ban goes into effect in the beginning of the next year. Now, that obviously won't cover the national election that is coming up right around the corner, but it does have implications for all future political actions because people go to TikTok for their information. It is a reality of life, especially in the last couple of years.
If this legal battle is not settled in January, I guess first question is, do you think it'll be settled by January? If it's not, then what happens? Does the app then disappear from our app stores?
I do think the D.C. Court of Appeals can hear this case and issue an opinion relatively quickly if they want to. This is one thing we know about courts. When they're motivated, they can turn things around very quickly. Bush v. Gore is a great example. Supreme Court issued a decision there in a matter of days. So, yes, if all goes forward as the government plans, if there are no injunctions or the court doesn't rule in favor of ByteDance and the Supreme Court either declines to hear it or rules against them, then this ban could go into effect.
All right, Danny, thank you so much.
All right, this morning now, the Coast Guard will begin 2 weeks of formal hearings in Charleston, South Carolina. The goal is to shed new light on how the Titan submersible imploded on its 2023 expedition to explore the Titanic, killing 5 people.
The Coast Guard is also trying to determine if any laws were broken, calling this its highest level of investigation. Nearly 24 witnesses will testify, but there are several key witnesses who won't take the stand.
Board-certified civil trial lawyer John Jack Hickey joins us now. He's also a board-certified Admiralty and Maritime lawyer. Good to have you with us. So this hearing comes after months of investigation, the recovery of the submersible from the Atlantic Ocean. How is this hearing going to work? I mean, what is it the Coast Guard's ultimately looking for here?
So, you know, the Coast Guard is looking for reasons. Why did this happen? How did this happen in this day and age of technology? How did it happen that 5 people go down in this submersible, including the CEO, Stockton Rush of OceanGate? How did it happen that they did not anticipate the crushing effect of the ocean down there? And so we're going to see in 2 weeks, we're going to hear testimony from this U.S. Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation. As I think you alluded to, it's the highest level of investigative body and process by the Coast Guard. So over 2 weeks, we're going to hear testimony from a lot of people, including OceanGate people. Now, let me just add one thing is tomorrow, one of the former OceanGate employees is going to testify, and that is David Lockridge. David Lockridge is the former director of marine operations for OceanGate, who in 2018 wrote the letter to the public, I suppose, because it's in the public domain, saying that he had concerns, that he urged the owner, Stockton Rush, to have the submersible certified by the American Bureau of Shipping. And Stockton Rush did not do that. That was a voluntary thing, or it would have been a voluntary thing, but that's going to be really interesting to hear what the now former employee said and why he said it in 2018, long before this went down last year.
Sir, there are quite a few key witnesses, though, like most of the former OceanGate executive team who will not be testifying. Some reports show that those individuals were not subpoenaed by the Coast Guard because they had said they would plead the Fifth. The Coast Guard said that's not why they weren't subpoenaed. But how significant is it that we won't be hearing from OceanGate leaders and the manufacturer of the submersible?
Look, if I'm counseling, I'm a civil lawyer, but if I'm counseling the OceanGate executives, frankly, almost every OceanGate employee about testifying. I'm going to tell them you need to seek representation and advice from a criminal defense attorney and consider taking the fifth and not testifying if I'm representing them, which I'm not. But that is standard advice. I think it's interesting that that the Coast Guard did get so many OceanGate employees to actually testify. Query whether, the question is, well, when did they cease being employees?
Right.
All right. Jack Hickey, appreciate your expertise this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming up, we are staying on top of that breaking news after another apparent attempt on former President Donald Trump's life.
We have the latest on the investigation and what we've learned about the suspect next. All right, we are back now with more on our top story this morning. The FBI says it's investigating an apparent assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump.
Mr. Trump was playing golf at his club in West Palm Beach yesterday when a Secret Service agent spotted a rifle with a scope in the bushes. The agent opened fire on the fleeing suspect. An eyewitness saw the suspect get in a car and snapped a photo that he later shared with police. Then the suspect was later arrested and now remains in custody. Following the incident, West Palm Beach's county sheriff explained some of the security limitations facing law enforcement when it comes to protecting the former president.
And at this level that he is at right now, he's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. Well, because he's not, the security is limited to the areas that the Secret Service deems possible.
All right, here now with more is NBC News law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, we know you've been following this incident very closely over the past 24 hours. Bring us up to speed on what we know about the suspect and what happened here.
Right, so just check the federal court system out of Florida, so no charges have been filed yet in the federal system. We do expect them to be filed against Ryan Wesley Ruth, who's born in February of 1966. Not quite sure yet what he's going to face as far as charges go, but certainly they could be potentially quite serious. He did point his weapon at the U.S. Secret Service. His background and his past, kind of a mix of different things. So he says in a social media post that back in 2016, he voted for President Trump, but then changed his views based on the way that Trump conducted himself while in office. Went to Ukraine in 2022, very much pro-Ukrainian, and really wanted people to travel to Ukraine to put up a fight against the Russians and their unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. So those are kind of a general sense of his views. His political views appear to be kind of transient. They shift back and forth. He did have a donation to a pro-democratic group, basically Act Blue, which gives to different causes. So where he sits on the political spectrum, a little unclear. One thing that's not unclear is his support, certainly, for Ukraine.
Presumably, one part of the investigation will be whether anyone else knew about this or helped him out with this at all?
Yeah, great question. So as far as any sort of accomplices, or was anybody in the bushes with him yesterday or helping him drive this car that we see pulled over, no indication of that whatsoever, no evidence of that. But the gun is a big question because he's got an extensive criminal history. And so if he purchased that illegally, if somebody sold it to him illegally, or he asked somebody because he couldn't purchase a gun based on that criminal history, it is illegal. There's certain statutes against that. A convicted felon, after they've served a certain amount of jail sentence, that they can't buy a gun. If somebody purchased that on his behalf in order to get around those laws, that could also be a crime. So those are all the types of things that investigators are working on right now.
And Tom, what are you hearing from law enforcement officials about security preparations going forward? We're in the home stretch of a presidential election season.
I mean, the enormity of this challenge. Look, 0.8 of a mile from where we are sitting here in this studio is the United Nations. And so we have the United Nations General Assembly that starts for real a week from today. Over 100 foreign leaders will be in town. The president, perhaps other members, key members of the U.S. political system will be there. So this is an enormous challenge for the Secret Service. We've less than 2 months to go to Election Day. How this campaign now starts to look for both candidates, both for Harris and Trump, going forward as they crisscross around the country. People now believe they can get a gun within eyesight of a presidential candidate. Who acts from here? Who tries this again? huge concern being talked about this morning at the highest levels of federal law enforcement.
All right, Tom Winter, thanks so much.
You got it.
Now, this apparent assassination attempt on former President Trump has once again raised the specter of political violence in America. Yet this is not a new phenomenon in U.S. politics.
No, it's not. You know, how the attempt on the former president will affect the campaign remains to be seen. But similar attacks in history can provide insight on where the country can go from here.
So for more on the historical impact of this attack, NBC's presidential historian Michael Beschloss joins us now. Michael, always good to have you with us. I want to start by asking, I mean, this is now the second time we're having this discussion in about 2 months. What do you think this means for the country and where we are as a nation?
It means that we've got to make a decision of how tolerable this is. And of course, you know, every sane person in the United States would say even a close call like yesterday is absolutely intolerable. So the result is we're going to have to decide sooner rather than later whether there are going to have to be more resources to the Secret Service and other investigative organizations. And this is in keeping with history. After John Kennedy was murdered in 1963, for instance, former presidents got Secret Service protection for the first time. After Robert Kennedy was killed in 1968, President Johnson ordered, with the consent of Congress, that for the first time, Secret Service agents accompany the major presidential candidates. All of American history before then, that had not happened.
You know, Trump, not the first president to survive repeated assassination attempts. In 1975, President Gerald Ford survived 2 attempts within just, I think, 17 days of each other. So
Right.
this threat of political violence is not new in our history. How has the country stepped back from this precipice before?
By increasing, just as I was saying, the protection. We have to do that. And there have been other attempts, too, not just the famous presidential assassinations, which tragically succeeded. Franklin Roosevelt, the president-elect, was almost killed in Miami. Theodore Roosevelt, as a presidential candidate in 1912, was shot, could very easily have been killed, and George Wallace the same in the spring of 1972. So the fact that, thank God, this has not happened for decades in a serious way, with the exception of the almost tragic attempt against President Trump, which every American has to denounce, we've got to look for ways to fix this, because aside from the human element, the danger of this to our society and our political system is much too great, and it's just unacceptable.
After Mr. Trump was shot at and injured during that campaign rally in July, there were a lot of similarities drawn between his experience and the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan in 1981. Both were injured during public events. The bond between Reagan and the public was stronger after that attack. The response to Trump seems to be much more divisive. What does that say about our political climate right now?
Sadly, we are living in a different country from what it was in 1981, sadly in most ways. But the way I'm talking about is much more violent a country. There are many more weapons in the hands of private citizens, assault weapons, for instance, as we saw yesterday. And this is a country that is politically, I don't need to tell either of you, Joe or Christine, a lot angrier than it was in 1981. So in a certain way, we've got a protection system that is reminiscent of 1981. We're living in a different country. We've got to do much better.
All right. Michael Beschloss, good to have you with us this morning, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa says he has no plans to retire after suffering his 3rd concussion.
Yeah, the new questions about his future and why that decision may not be up to him. That's next. All right, we're back now with the growing speculation over the future of Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa in the NFL. The young star is reportedly meeting with doctors this week as he faces calls to retire after multiple concussions in his career. The latest came from a scary collision last week against the Buffalo Bills, but now he says he wants to keep playing. NBC News correspondent George Solis has more.
Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa saying he has no plans to retire in the aftermath of his latest concussion. While there's no timetable for his return, the final decision may not be his alone to make, according to NFL national insider Ian Rappaport.
Tua Tagovailoa and his doctors will be making the decisions about his playing, his health. They will be driving the process.
Tagovailoa facing a growing chorus of calls to hang up his helmet, given his history of brain injuries on the field, including this harrowing hit to the head against Bills safety Damar Hamlin last Thursday that stunned audiences nationwide, including Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce.
I had to tell him to retire. It's not worth it.
The Athletic's Mark Pulio saying it's a scenario seldom seen at this level.
How unprecedented is this?
There's never been a young quarterback of this stature with making this much money that's dealt with this severity of injury that's had to face a decision like this.
Pulio says still unclear how retirement would impact Tagovailoa's 4-year, $212 million contract. Some analysts saying it shouldn't be a concern.
It should not be based on money. He got paid big. Don't be based on pressure.
The 26-year-old quarterback is also expected to meet with doctors this week to assess this most recent injury and the potential trauma left behind from at least 3 concussions in 3 seasons. Some former players now urging him to consider his legacy beyond the game.
There is life after football.
But whether it will be on or off the field remains to be seen. George Solis, NBC News.
All right, joining us now with more on this is Dr. Shay Data. She's co-director of the NYU Langone Concussion Center and a concussion and brain trauma specialist. Doctor, good morning. You know, following Tua's latest concussion, we've heard from former players and coaches saying that if they were them, they would seriously consider retiring to prioritize their brain health. Can you describe the biggest risks, what they are when picking up multiple severe concussions?
Absolutely. Good morning. Multiple concussions can lead to basically a brain injury that has far-reaching effects like post-traumatic migraines, memory loss, mood issues, balance issues, and they can be far-reaching in terms of whatever you have underlying that could be worse. Sometimes people also get mobility issues, you know, sort of like early-reaching Parkinson's and Alzheimer's that we've seen in the past.
Doctor, it's not just those scary big hits that can be dangerous, but just repetitive blows to the head are harmful as well. What are some of the most common misconceptions you hear about when it comes to concussions and when it comes to brain trauma?
That's a great question. Common misconceptions are that helmets prevent concussions or brain injury. They do not. The other one is that you have to actually lose consciousness in order to have a concussion. That's actually not true as well. And the third, most common one is that you need a direct hit to the head to get a concussion. No, it could be to the neck, to the body, to the front or the side, and you can still get concussions if you get hit anywhere but your head.
Doctor, sports are obviously a major part of many people's lives, and hits to the head, they happen from time to time. How can athletes best prepare themselves from potential serious effects of repeated head injuries?
Now, that is actually a tough one to answer, but the best thing to do is make sure you are trained well. The head and neck has to be strong, especially in high-impact sports like this, like football, hockey. The head and neck apparatus has to be strong so that when you get that whiplash injury or that concussion, that you're able to sustain it. Also, being aware, very self-aware when you are hit, how you're feeling in order to take yourself out. And I think those would be the top 2 things I would say to prevent it. And proper gear, as we discussed. It may not prevent a concussion, but it can prevent perhaps, you know, having a larger skull fracture or C-spine injuries.
Certainly at school, at least, they take concussion protocol much more seriously today, like when we were kids, you know. I mean, we're really aware about it and talking about it a lot more. Doctor, thank you so much. Nice to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Now for what's making financial headlines this morning. It looks like a sizable pay bump is in store for some workers next year.
That's right. CNBC's Savannah Henao joins us with that story. Good morning, Savannah.
Good morning, Christine. Good morning, Joe. Yeah, so corporations, well, they seemed to be prepared to give slightly larger raises to workers next year, according to a new Conference Board survey. The mostly large corporations are projecting an average increase in their base pay budgets of 3.9%. That number usually reflects average raises employees may receive, and it's higher than the 3.8% bump seen this year, but lower than the 4.4% average increase in 2023, which was a 20-year high. Apple's new iPhone 16 hits store shelves this Friday, but there could be a catch if you're looking to upgrade. Mac Rumors reports the price of Apple's battery repair service for the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max will now cost $119. That's a $20 jump over the old fee. The price will remain the same for the standard and plus models, as well as for last year's phones. Beetlejuice clawed its way back to the #1 spot at the box office this weekend. Following its monster opening last weekend, the Tim Burton sequel raked in another $51.6 million in ticket sales. That's according to studio estimates. That brings its gross in North America at $188 million, and it is a big win for Warner Brothers, which had a weak summer box office, bringing in only a 4.7% share of summer ticket sales. The second-place film lagged far behind. James McAvoy's Speak No Evil made an estimated $11.5 million, guys.
All right. Have you seen Beetlejuice yet?
Nope.
It is fun. It just hits the spirit of the first one just right.
I'd love to hear that.
And I've also had MacArthur Park, the song, in my head for days.
I'm going to watch the old one first.
Yes, we did.
I'm going to watch the old one first so then I can
100%.
refresh my memory.
All right, Silvana, thanks so much. Appreciate
Sure.
it. Coming up, the 2024 Emmys are officially in the books.
So who won big? Who missed out? We're breaking down the biggest night in TV next. WNBA superstar Caitlin Clark has broken yet another record. The #1 draft pick set a new record high of 746 points in a single rookie season last night during the Indiana Fever's game against the Dallas Wings. The record was previously held by Simone Augustus back in 2006. Clark has helped Indiana secure its first spot in the playoffs since 2016 and is overwhelmingly favorite to win Rookie of the Year. Iowa's pride and joy.
Kidding. And just every day it's a new record. Like, you started reading this and I'm like, oh, yeah, we talked about this record on Saturday. Nope, that was a different record on Saturday. Now she's got a new one.
Oh, my gosh. Breaking the records.
All right, finally this hour, it was television's night to shine as the 76th annual Emmy Awards were held at the Peacock Theater in Los Angeles last night.
And while FX Shogun was the night's big winner, picking up a record 18 trophies, the most for a drama during a single season, there were also some serious surprises during last night's ceremony. For all the evening's highlights, surprises, and snubs, let's bring in entertainment journalist and pop culture expert Brian Balthazar. Good morning, Brian. Let's start with Shogun, picking up a record-smashing 18 awards, also making history as a non-English show. What are some of the bigger categories it won?
Right. Well, this is obviously, you see that great, what a celebration for them. And they also won 2 awards in the acting category last night. Anna Sawai for Best Actress, as well as Hiroyuki Sanada for Actor. So again, a big night. But of course, everyone is really kind of talking about The Bear and Hacks and kind of this face-off in the category of comedy. Obviously, The Bear has nothing to complain about. With a record-breaking 23 nominations, they walked away with 11 last night, many of them in the acting categories. We had Jeremy Allen White win for Best Actor. Evan Mus-Bachrach won for Best Supporting Actor. And then we had a great win in Liza Colon-Zayas for Best Supporting Actress, and she clearly did not expect to win. She actually said on stage that her husband had told her to write a speech. She did not. She was not prepared. It was a really moving speech. Now, what's interesting about this one in particular, she had a very dramatic role on this show. After she won this award, Lorraine Newman, a Saturday Night Live alum, who's also the mother of Hannah Einbinder, the supporting actress who rivaled her in this category here, tweeted something inflammatory, which she later deleted, about how The Bear is not a comedy. I think this conversation is one that's going to continue because as we then later got into the course of the evening, what show won for Best Comedy Series but Hacks? Right. And of course, that was kind of a surprise because we had seen so many precedent-setting awards for The Bear. But that's right. The show Hacks won Best Comedy, and also Jean Smart won for Best Actress. So this was a real surprise moment for the cast of Hacks. I think the conversation about whether or not The Bear is a true comedy and deserves to be in that category will continue. Jean Smart, of course, you know, it was anyone's guess who was going to win that night, and she gave a great speech. She does a great job in that role, and it's a comedy about comedy, which I thought was very interesting as well.
Brian, let's take a step back and talk about The Bear. And one of the reasons we want to talk about it, it was a comedy show, picked up 11 trophies. We had Liza on just a few weeks ago. It was a pleasure talking with her when she was on the show last month. We asked her about the nomination. At the time, it was a nomination. She had this to say. When you got that news, just what went through your mind? How did that feel?
I started laughing maniacally because I just thought my reps were being nice to me.
So more than just an empty compliment, she did win. Yeah, it was a good night for the Bears still, even if they didn't win the big one, right?
I think we're all rooting for her, aren't we? Like when you watch the show, you're rooting for her, and then you see her in interviews like that one, and you're rooting for her. And this whole kind of controversy about the category, it really evolved from the fact that The Bear is a shorter show. It's about a half an hour in general. Historically, and because of some rules, shorter shows, 30-minute shows, were generally put in the comedy category. So there's a lot of weird backstory to why this happens, but who cannot support this win right here? An amazing performance. They're all giving great performances. There's Meryl Streep. She won in a competition against Meryl Streep and Kevin Burnett. I mean, right now she's got to be she's got to be above the clouds this morning.
Another upset, RuPaul's Drag Race, which won, I think, best reality competition series for the past 8 years, did not take home the top spot last night. Who beat them across the finish line?
That's right. The show Traitors won, and it was a surprise, obviously, but we had a little inkling, a hint maybe, last week when Ellen Cumming won for Best Host. Typically, RuPaul wins that Best Host category, and then the show RuPaul's Drag Race wins for Best Reality Competition. And I gotta say, if you've watched season 2 of Traitors, it is a fantastic show. It is a great reality show, great competition. So if you haven't watched it, I would start with season 2. It really is where it hits its stride.
I love Ellen Cumming. I've loved Alan Cumming since War Games. Yes. Brian Balthazar, thanks so much. Nice to see you.
Fantastic in this show, too.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for this hour. Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Good Monday morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Christine Romans. Savannah is on assignment. Developing right now on Morning News Now, former President Trump is safe and unharmed. This morning, after what the FBI is calling another apparent assassination attempt yesterday afternoon, Mr. Trump out golfing at his course in West Palm Beach, Florida, when investigators say Secret Service spotted this rifle and scope along with 2 backpacks and a GoPro camera in some bushes just outside of the course. Then they opened fire on this man, 58-year-old Ryan Ruth. He was later taken into custody. We've got much more on that suspect's tattered past with law enforcement. As new questions emerge about the Secret Service's ability to secure the former president and GOP nominee. Plus, reaction to this latest attempt on Mr. Trump's life from Washington and beyond. This latest incident involving the former president comes just 2 months after a gunman opened fire at Mr. Trump during a rally in Pennsylvania.
NBC's Garrett Hake has the latest on the FBI investigation from West Palm Beach, Florida.
Donald Trump was 5 holes into his round of golf here Sunday when investigators say a Secret Service agent spotted a man hiding in the bushes with an assault-style rifle and opened fire on him. Other agents whisked the former president to safety. Overnight, Donald Trump thanking those agents for keeping him safe amid what appears to be a second attempt on his life in 3 months. This morning, Donald Trump is safe, a suspect is in custody, and the FBI is investigating what it calls an apparent assassination attempt on the former president Sunday at his Florida golf club. Authorities say a Secret Service agent spotted a rifle in the bushes near where Mr. Trump was golfing Sunday afternoon and opened fire.
They have an agent that jumps 1 hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual.
Agents rushed Mr. Trump to safety. According to the sheriff, a witness saw the suspect run out of the bushes and jump into a black Nissan. He was arrested a short time later. 3 law enforcement sources tell NBC News that suspect has been identified as 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth. Ruth was unarmed when arrested, and it's not clear if he ever fired a weapon. But investigators say they recovered an AK-47 style rifle with a scope, 2 backpacks, and a GoPro camera at the scene, not far from the former president.
Probably between 300 and 500 yards, but with a rifle and a scope like that, that's not a long distance.
The suspect has a long criminal and civil court history. He's also been outspoken on his support for Ukraine. In an interview with Semaphore last year, Ruth discussed his efforts helping volunteers with the war effort there.
Ukraine is reluctant to be cooperative.
According to public records, Ruth voted in a Democratic primary in March. In 2020, Ruth wrote to Mr. Trump on social media, saying he supported him in 2016, but expressing disappointment with the former president. Overnight, in a post on Truth Social, Mr. Trump thanking the Secret Service and law enforcement for keeping him safe and said it was a, quote, interesting day. Writing earlier in campaign fundraising emails, quote, my resolve is only stronger after another attempt on my life. Sunday's apparent assassination attempt would be the second attempt on Mr. Trump's life in 3 months. A July shooting during a political rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, injured Mr. Trump's ear and left the suspect dead. That incident is now being investigated by law enforcement and Congress. No motive has yet been determined. Both President Biden and Vice President Harris issuing statements overnight condemning political violence and commending the work of the Secret Service, keeping the former president safe. President Biden going further still, saying in his statement he would ensure the Secret Service has the resources necessary to continue with its protective work to keep the former president safe throughout the duration of this election. Guys.
All right, Garrett, thank you.
Let's talk more about this with Dave Ehrenberg. He's the state attorney for Palm Beach County. His office was overseeing state charges against the suspect before the federal government took over the case. Good morning. Talk to us about your office's involvement in the initial stages of this case before it was handed over. What can you tell us about the suspect and the incident?
Well, it's good to be with you. So my office was involved at the beginning when we were working with the sheriff to make sure this guy was kept behind bars, because at the beginning, the feds were working on this case and hadn't made a decision about charging and when they would do it. So just to make sure he wasn't going to get out and slip through the cracks, we were going to charge him, and we were working up warrants and asking for a motion for pretrial detention. After the press conference yesterday, I received a message from the feds that said that they were going to assert jurisdiction, as is their right. And this really is more of a federal matter anyways. They have statutes that we don't have on the books, like a threat to an ex-president, which can get you up to 5 years in prison. But they can also charge this suspect with other crimes, like ex-felon in possession of a firearm. That's the easiest charge to make here, as well as aggravated assault with a firearm against a law enforcement official, in this case, the Secret Service agent, where he pointed, according to reports, the AK-47 style rifle at the Secret Service agent. So that can get you up to 20 years in prison.
Yeah, explain to us just that, now that this is being taken care of at the federal level, how that changes the types of charges, the level of punishment. Is it at all possible state charges could be a factor here, or is it simply going to be handled at the federal level?
Right. It's all going to be federal now. In fact, he's expected to see a federal magistrate at his initial appearance either today or tomorrow, although he is kept apparently at the local jail. That's where they keep state and federal inmates. Ironically, where he's kept right now at the jail is next to the golf course. He gets another bird's eye view of the golf course, but this time behind bars.
So, Dave, how does the case proceed from here? What will authorities need to determine in order to convict this suspect, and what kind of punishment could he face?
Well, the most serious charge would be aggravated assault with a firearm against a federal law enforcement officer. That would be the Secret Service agent who would have to testify that this guy pointed the gun at him. Now, there's also the GoPro that this guy had, and that could be also important evidence because people lie, but video does not. And then the easiest charge is the fact that he's an ex-felon from North Carolina in possession of this semi-automatic weapon. That is a major crime, punishable by up to 10 years in prison, and it's easy to prove. You don't have to get inside someone's head on intent. Did he mean to point it at someone? No. If he possessed the weapon, he can go down for that. And so I do think that he's going to serve significant time in federal prison when this is all said and done.
Did you say 3 to 5 years for a threat on an ex-president? I guess maybe that feels low to me, but I'm not the expert here.
The threat would be up to 5 years in prison. It's actually the least of the charges. Now, remember, the threat is not the aggravated assault. If it's proven that he pointed the gun at the former president, that would be aggravated assault with a firearm. That would be very serious. The threat is a lesser crime, still can get you prison. It would just be his writings, his social media posts, if he said something about trying to do the former president a harm. That's where the investigation will continue to see what was in the bag and what his social media comments were. And so this whole thing is ongoing.
Dave Ehrenberg, so nice to see you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Keep this conversation going now with NBC News law enforcement analyst, former Secret Service Special Agent Abby Pompouris. Good to have you with us. We just chatted with you a little more than 2 months ago with the first attempt on the former president. Now we have this second apparent attempt. How unprecedented is this to see this so close to each other?
It's definitely concerning, deeply concerning, because you're looking at two months, 2 attempts. Typically, we see these over decades spread out. I'm not surprised. Copycats are always an issue, and I do think with the first attempt, there's going to be likely inspiration by other people thinking, oh, if I can get that close, if somebody else can get that close and do that, I can do the same. There's also a lot of similarities here. Long distance, right? Trying to engage the protectee, President Trump, from a distance, using long weapons, outdoors again. So you're seeing the average person think, oh, I think I can do this. I can get in proximity of the president. I don't have to be that close to him to do something. You know what's interesting? Normally in the U.S. Secret Service, one of the trainings we do would be rope lines and people who are in close, shaking hands, looking at people's hands. And by the way, hands are always what you're trained to look at. Right. And now something's shifting. Now it's the distance, it's line of sight, it's far away. Not that they didn't consider those things before, but now that is coming into play. So I don't have to just worry about my inner area, my security bubble inside. I really need to think about the outer perimeters.
Given what we saw 9 weeks ago, I mean, why wasn't this golf course shut down? I mean, what do you think is the Secret Service assessment at this point about how to proceed here?
I think because he's gone to that golf course before, they had a security plan, they worked with local authorities, they felt that it was locked tight. I don't think they could have thought that something. You should always have imagination when it comes to stuff like this. But I think they're thinking the distance maybe played a role in keeping him safe and having all those local authorities. Look, in the end, I will say this, the agent did catch it. The agent did serve his purpose. They thwarted it. So we can Monday morning quarterback this to some degree. But to be fair, they were able to stop the attempt.
They saw the barrel of the gun in the bushes.
But
that's phenomenal, by the way.
But 2 seconds later, and it could have been a different story. We don't know. So does that make them say, OK, we've got to still make some more changes here. This isn't good enough yet. Do you expect we're going to see some more changes to how both the former president and the vice president, both on the campaign trail, are protected?
Yes, absolutely. At this point, you just want to keep everybody alive and get to the election. You're looking at it, I would think, intense manpower changes. You're seeing the second attempt. You want to stop these. And, you know, as far as the charges going federal, you want to make an example. It's definitely one of the things we know that deters crime and copycats is getting punished swiftly and severely. So I can see the U.S. Secret Service definitely amping up assets, going to local authorities. Remember, local authorities are typically the ones out of perimeter. I could see them strategically putting some agents outside to work closer with local authorities. You need more manpower out there, more uniforms, too. One thing that helps deter something like this are uniforms. If I'm a bad actor and I see a police officer or just a cruiser, I'm just not going to go there. I'm going to turn around. Those simple things can help mitigate stuff like this.
How worried should they be about copycats? You mentioned copycats. I mean, the kind of grandiose lone wolf who wants to make some kind of a political statement or maybe unhinged, you know, I mean, do they see these kinds of events and are inspired?
A lot of the threats you would get for presidents or protectees would be people with mental health issues. It's not always just political. It's a combination of the mental health issues and the fixation that they have. I am not surprised. What is happening, though, you're seeing a shift happen. Something's happening in society where I do think we're going to see more and more of these outdoor events, something to really think about. We're seeing, again, another exposure, being outside. It's making them vulnerable. Maybe for now, until they come up with a better long-term solution, minimize these movements. Say, hey, look, we're just trying to get to the election. Let's talk to our protectees. Can we minimize things? Let's make sure we have enough resources or even more than what we need, double it, so that we can prevent this stuff from happening. You don't want a number 3.
Bottom line, indoor events are, I don't want to say foolproof, but boy, it's just hard to have any sort of risk to these candidates inside those, right?
You know, when I was an agent, I never could say I got it 100% because you can build a plan and somebody can get through it in some way. But when you've got walls around you and a ceiling, it really helps minimize. If I designate, I want this door open, that door open, this is where everybody's going to come in. I'm going to put my magnetometers. I'm going to have my checkpoints there so I can funnel people a certain direction. And then once they're into typically a clean, swept environment, I'm good to go. So it does really minimize things. You also don't have to worry about what's above you, what's below you. In a place like New York City, you've got subways underneath you.
All right, Evie Pomporis, we appreciate your expertise. Thanks so much for coming in this morning.
All right, let's now bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale for more reaction. Good morning. You know, what are we hearing this morning from members of Congress about yesterday's incident?
Look, in bipartisan fashion, we are once again here condemning political violence. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill saying that they have continued questions, of course, about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, but then also what happened yesterday and what the Secret Service was able to avert. I thought that it was a great segment that you were just doing from a Secret Service perspective on preparedness. And what struck me is when she was talking about how you'll likely see a change in manpower. We've got 50 some odd days until Election Day at this point, I believe. That's going to be a big demand from members on Capitol Hill, not just Republicans who have certainly been outspoken in these immediate hours after what was averted yesterday, but Democrats as well, who say there's no space for political violence here. They cannot believe that this almost, thankfully didn't, but almost happened again.
You know, Ali, the Secret Service obviously has been in the spotlight following July's assassination attempt against the former president. So are House Republicans already talking about how they're looking to investigate this latest incident over the weekend?
Definitely. And I imagine from a practical perspective, Joe, this is going to get wrapped into a task force that already exists on the attempted assassination of former President Trump, that being from Butler, Pennsylvania. That task force has already convened. They already plan to have hearings. Speaker Mike Johnson was actually on another network this morning saying that he thinks the first of those hearings won't be this week, but probably next week, the last that Congress is in session before the election. So that'll be critical timing. But when you talk about Secret Service being in the spotlight, you've also got members making other recommendations here. The idea, they say, that it should no longer be housed under the Department of Homeland Security. They think it was better off under the Treasury Department. That change happened in 2003. So I'll be interested to hear once they come back to town today and tomorrow what reasoning they're given, but certainly that's something that we're starting to hear. And then they're going to get more briefings on this. Speaker Mike Johnson was actually at Mar-a-Lago with the former president when the head of the Secret Service called him, gave him an update about 90 minutes after all of this happened. We'll be interested to hear what he has to say. The Secret Service told him both then and then also since, because this is another instance of having more questions than answers at this point, even though we are in a very different situation, thankfully, than we were after what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania.
You know, Ali, during a briefing yesterday, the Palm Beach County Sheriff says since Mr. Trump is not a sitting president, the security was, quote, limited to the areas the agency deemed possible. This has members of Congress looking for some changes, right?
They're looking for changes, and I imagine it's going to be close to what your last guest is saying. The idea of indoor events is something that the Trump campaign has already adopted. We're seeing it, for example, coming up this week when he's going to be at Nassau Coliseum on Long Island. That's an indoor event, not the kinds of open field that they were doing prior to and during Butler, Pennsylvania. But then in addition to saying where the Secret Service should be housed, you've got members of Congress just demanding more manpower. That's going to be something that I imagine the Secret Service is going to hear quite loudly. And again, we've got just a few weeks until Election Day. This is when, you guys know this, all of the schedules ramp up. Every reporter, every operative, and certainly every candidate for president is out on the campaign trail. That includes former President Trump, of course, and we are going to need a ramp up in security. Members of Congress demanding that now.
Yeah, 50 days to go. Ali, thank you so much.
TikTok is officially getting its day in court later today as part of a lawsuit that's trying to stop that nationwide ban on the social media platform, which is set to take effect on January 19th.
The company and a group of content creators accused the government of violating the First Amendment rights of Americans when it passed a law requiring TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, to sell the platform by the January deadline or get banned across the U.S.
The Department of Justice says TikTok does not fall under constitutional protection for free speech and that the platform poses a threat to national security. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles and NBC News International correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer are all here to break it down. First, good morning to both of you. Thanks for joining us. Ryan, we'll start with you. The Department of Justice is planning to use evidence that TikTok really isn't even allowed to see due to national security concerns. Walk us through its argument to try and uphold this law that would enforce this all-out ban.
Yeah, Joe, this is a complicated case on many levels, and you mentioned the fact that much of the evidence is classified. It's just part of it. There's really never been a situation where you had a social media platform with as much volume as TikTok facing the prospect of being shut down in the United States. TikTok has more than 170 million users in the United States right now, and that's part of their argument to this federal court, that if you ban this app in the United States, you are effectively denying the First Amendment rights of every single person who uses the app. But the federal government, and particularly Congress, which passed the law earlier this year, say that the national security concerns around TikTok far outweigh any First Amendment concerns. They believe that TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is working with the Chinese government to actively collect the data of millions of Americans, and at the same time potentially using TikTok as a propaganda tool. And that evidence that you talk about that's currently redacted in all of the court filings, it's something that only the judges can see is part of an intelligence gathering operation by the United States government, which they say proves that ByteDance is working with the Chinese government to collect that data and make it a national security threat. But it is difficult for TikTok to make the argument against the claims that are being made by the federal government when they can't even see part of the evidence, Joe.
Yeah, some of that is redacted. Janice, what is TikTok arguing in its lawsuit against the DOJ?
Well, the company hasn't laid out exactly how it plans to challenge the law, but experts figure it is going to focus on the First Amendment and these alleged violations of the company's rights and also the rights of all of its users in the U.S. If you look at the messaging that TikTok has put out leading up to this, it's hinting at this issue of freedom of expression. In a video message, the TikTok CEO posted, called the ban a ban on TikTok and a ban on you and your voice. The thing is, experts say this is not going to be an easy fight for TikTok because the judges in this might hesitate to make decisions on important national security issues and also don't want to be seen as not protecting U.S. interests. The company is also saying that it might not be feasible to force a sale by January of 2025 because ultimately any decision on a sale of the company to a U.S. company is going to be made here in Beijing.
Yeah, so Janice, how is Beijing, where you are, responding to these DOJ assertions that China's ownership of the platform poses national security risks?
Well, it's curious because at a spokesperson level or commerce officials level, they've been talking about it a lot. They say that it's a witch hunt. They accuse the U.S. of trying to suppress foreign companies by creating what they see as bogus national security concerns because it's China. At a higher level, the government seems to be keeping its distance, at least for now. They are realizing that there are political implications for the U.S.-China relationship over this potential ban. As well, the leadership here is watching the election and seeing and assessing a possible change in the White House. For the company, they have it coming from both sides. TikTok doesn't exist here. ByteDance has a sister app called Douyin. It's massive. They have 700 million daily active users. They have parental control, screen time limits, and they generate a lot of revenue. And ByteDance is not looking to upset that. They know at heart they are a Chinese company operating under Chinese law, and they are not looking to offend the Chinese government.
You know, Ryan, how could the presidential election affect the end result of this legal battle with TikTok?
There could be a lot of implications, Christine, but it's unclear exactly how it would play out because both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have given mixed messages about how they feel about TikTok. Obviously, it was the Biden administration that Kamala Harris is a part of that pushed for this law to be passed that would force ByteDance to divest their interest. But both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and their campaigns are actively using TikTok as a way to reach out to younger voters. Many young voters use TikTok as their principal form of information gathering. And so both campaigns recognize that they can't just ignore the power of this platform, especially in an election where things are going to be so close. It's also important to keep in mind that when Donald Trump was president, he issued an executive order that would have forced ByteDance to divest their interest in TikTok, but that was denied by a federal court. So there's no doubt that the election is going to have a big impact on this going forward. Just what that impact will be remains to be seen.
So, Janice, if the federal appeals court upholds the U.S. law and ultimately forces ByteDance to sell TikTok. Do we have an idea of what that's even going to look like?
It's whether to sell and what to sell. There are export controls in place here. China has its own national security laws, and China could veto the sale of TikTok or any of its parts to a U.S. company. They have these export controls on technologies that are created in China, like the algorithm that makes TikTok so valuable, the way that it can learn what a user likes and then feed them a steady stream of content. So there are several scenarios that we could see. ByteDance could sell parts of TikTok, the brand, the content, the user base, but ultimately not the algorithm that makes it so valuable. As well, there is also the risk that China's government, by imposing that veto, could add fuel to the fire for critics in the U.S. who may look at that and see it as an example of how China's government has control over ByteDance and over TikTok, and basically justifying all of the fears that have brought them to this point. So a lot of geopolitics are going into that courtroom as well.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, Ryan and Janice with more on a court case with huge implications for a lot of people. Thank you both.
All right, tributes are pouring in this morning for Tito Jackson, who died Sunday afternoon. The singer was a founding member of the Jackson 5, performing alongside his brothers from the 1960s. Today, anchor Chanel Jones has more on his life and legacy.
This morning, family, friends, and fans are mourning the loss of Tito Jackson, the star and original member of the Jackson 5, and of course the brother of superstars Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson. His death confirmed by his sons, writing on Instagram, "We are shocked, saddened, and heartbroken." Tito, alongside his brothers Jackie, Jermaine, Marlon, and Michael, rose to fame in the 1960s and 70s, creating a string of chart-topping hits sung by his younger brother Michael, such as ABC, I'll Be There, and The Love You Saved. Just 4 days before his death, Tito and his brothers visited a memorial for Michael in Munich, Germany, before performing a concert together there. Tito appeared on Today with Jermaine, Marlon, and Jackie several months after Michael died back in 2009.
We're a normal family. We love each other dearly, regardless of what people may think.
Tito's sons now sharing this message. Please remember to do what our father always preached, and that is love one another.
All right, our thanks to Chanel Jones for the look back at Tito Jackson's remarkable life.
Time now for a check on your morning news now weather. We're watching a potential tropical cyclone developing off the Carolinas.
That's right, meteorologist Violetta Yass joins us now with the very latest. Good morning, Violetta.
Good morning. Yes, we've been watching this one all morning long. It'll be interesting to see if this is upgraded with the 11 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, though at the moment, still a potential tropical cyclone, and we're not expecting too many changes in terms of impact if this is upgraded. Winds are up to 50 miles per hour. This is sitting about 85 miles south of Cape Fear. Tropical storm warnings have been in effect all morning long from Charleston all the way up through Morehead City. That means we can expect tropical storm force wind gusts, heavy rain, and of course those various coastal impacts as well. Our flood watch in effect from right around Myrtle Beach up through Raleigh and beyond. This impacting about 6 million people. Already some flash flood warnings in effect there across extreme southeastern North Carolina as well. So we'll be dealing with that heavy rain and flooding through today. Winds peaking right around that Myrtle Beach area up to about 60 miles per hour. Also pretty strong extending into Carolina Beach, and those strong onshore winds are likely to cause some storm surge as well on the order of 1 to 3 feet here from Cape Hatteras down through Morehead City, Wilmington, and Myrtle Beach as well. So in terms of how much rain we can expect, we're talking generally 2 to 4 inches, but notice this is a pretty wide swath here. Wilmington all the way up through really much of Virginia can expect to see that heavy rain. So 2 to 4 inches, but locally perhaps even more in some of those heavier downpours. So we'll see this move inland through today, regardless of whether or not it actually becomes a tropical storm. The impact's likely to stay the same. We'll see the heavy rain, the strong winds, the storm storm surge. The rough surf as well for today, and then tomorrow we'll see that start to spread inland. So it is going to be a rainy couple of days here for the Carolinas, and this eventually will bring some rain up into the Northeast as well. Perhaps not quite as much, but we'll see some impacts from this as well.
When, Wednesday, you said?
Wednesday.
All right, Violet, yes. Thank you so much.
Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including the latest out of the Middle East, where the IDF says it's highly likely that it mistakenly killed 3 hostages in an airstrike last November. We're going to bring you those details.
But first, after the break, diving deeper into what went wrong when that Titan submersible imploded over a year ago. What we might learn when the Coast Guard conducts its first public hearings on the tragedy today. That's next. Stay with us.
We're back now with new developments on a story that gripped the world. The fatal implosion of the Titan submersible near the Titanic site. More than a year after the Titan was discovered on the seafloor, the Coast Guard is set to begin the public-facing portion of its ongoing investigation into what happened.
NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss joins us now on set with more. Good morning, Steph.
Good morning, guys. You know, this is such a tough story, but they're hoping to get some answers. The Coast Guard's long-awaited public hearings on the loss of the Titan submersible are set to begin today in North Charleston, South Carolina. The hearings aim to uncover facts about the vessel's implosion on its way to the Titanic wreckage and to hopefully prevent similar incidents from ever happening again.
Nearly 15 months after the Titan submersible began its doomed journey to the bottom of the ocean, today the U.S. Coast Guard will begin the first public hearings as part of their investigation into what caused the tragedy.
This is one of the most complex investigations that I've ever been involved with.
Titan was on an expedition to explore the wreck of the Titanic in June of 2023, when all contact was lost less than 2 hours into its dive. The extensive international search for the vessel and the 5 men on board captivated the world's attention.
And let's get right to the story the whole world is watching, the urgent search for a missing submersible.
4 days later, the remains of the Titan were discovered on the seafloor using a remotely operated vehicle, roughly 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic. Officials said the submersible suffered a catastrophic implosion during its underwater descent, killing all 5 passengers.
It is a difficult day for all of us, and it's especially difficult for the families.
The Coast Guard says the purpose of the hearing, which will involve witnesses from all over the world, is to uncover the facts of what happened and make recommendations for future deep-sea explorations.
If there's any detection of a criminal act, we would make a recommendation to the Department of Justice.
The mini-sub was discovered at a depth of more than 2.5 miles, where the pressure is hundreds of times greater than it is on the surface. OceanGate, the Seattle-based company that built the submersible, was heavily criticized over its lack of testing and use of experimental materials. Titanic director James Cameron criticized the sub's design.
The collective we didn't remember the lesson of Titanic. These guys at OceanGate didn't, because the arrogance and the hubris that sent that ship to its doom is exactly the same thing that sent those people in that sub to their fate.
One of the men killed in the sub, Stockton Rush, the founder of OceanGate, addressed those concerns in 2022.
I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule where you don't do that. Well, I did.
OceanGate suspended operations after the implosion in July of 2023. In August, the estate of the French explorer, Mr. Naholet, sued OceanGate for more than $50 million. These hearings are not the final step of this investigation. There could be additional hearings and or witnesses. After they wrap the hearings, the NTSB and Coast Guard will split and do their own analysis to formulate some final reports on all of this, guys.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
All right, let's take a look at what's making international headlines, starting with some breaking news out of Germany. An explosion rocked the city of Cologne.
NBC News international correspondent Claudio Lavanga has that and other stories from Rome. Claudio, good morning.
Joe, Christine, good morning. Well, that's right. A police spokesperson told NBC News that that explosion took place at around 6 a.m. this morning at the entrance of a nightclub called Vanity in the city of Cologne. Now, the police also said that at least one person has been slightly injured in the incident. Local authorities wrote on X that several glass windows burst in the explosion and could have likely harmed more people if it happened at a later time. Let's go to Israel now, where an investigation into the deaths of 3 Israeli hostages in Gaza found there was a high probability that they were killed as a result of an Israeli airstrike. The bodies of the 3 hostages, Nick Beiser, Ron Sherman, and Elia Toledano, were found by Israeli soldiers last year in an underground tunnel that was hit by an airstrike targeting a Hamas commander. The Israeli Defense Forces said that at the time of the strike, they did not know about the presence of the hostages. The findings deliver another blow to Israel's government, which faces intense domestic protests calling for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. And let's end this tour of the world in Shanghai, where the strongest storm to hit the city since 1949 made landfall on Monday. Typhoon Bebinka brought China's biggest city and financial hub to a standstill. Flights out of its 2 airports were cancelled, several high-speed train routes were temporarily shut down, and major attractions like Disneyland were closed. Trees fell, electric poles were uprooted, and billboards flew as winds of up to 94 miles per hour battered the city. Officials forecast the storm should weaken by Monday evening and move westward. Back to you guys.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much. Coming up, new questions this morning about the Secret Service in the aftermath of that second apparent attempt on former President Trump's life.
After the break, we are digging into if more should be done at the agency when working to protect our political leaders. That is next on Morning News Now.
We're back now with more on our top story, the apparent assassination attempt against former President Trump. The focus this morning is once again on the people tasked with protecting our political leaders. This time around, the Secret Service managed to stop the would-be shooter. NBC News senior Washington correspondent and News Now anchor Hallie Jackson has more on this.
Hey there, new today. A Secret Service official tells NBC News the acting director is in Florida, set to meet with law enforcement partners today, walk the golf course, and maybe meet with Mr. Trump himself, although we're told that's not set. All as the latest incident here shines an even brighter spotlight on the agency tasked with protecting the president, plus key leaders and candidates. This morning, new questions being raised about the Secret Service after what the FBI describes as an apparent assassination attempt on former President Trump.
We live in dangerous times.
It comes just about 2 months after the first one at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. This time, officials say an agent opened fire after spotting a rifle near the former president's golf course in South Florida while Mr. Trump was playing.
He's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. The Secret Service did exactly what they should have done.
The agency has added personnel to Mr. Trump's protective detail since the Butler shooting, and they're also including more bulletproof glass at certain outdoor events. Lawmakers in both parties praising the Secret Service for its quick response while questioning whether more should be done.
We need to be taking a serious look at whether we are allocating resources correctly. Do we need more Secret Service agents?
The idea that there has been 2 attempts and they have been able to get close enough to the former president is deeply disturbing. I'm concerned that Donald Trump is actually not safe.
What happened Sunday, a contrast to the attempted assassination in July. In Florida, officials say Mr. Trump was 300 to 500 yards from where the weapon was spotted and walked away unharmed. In Pennsylvania, the shooter was about 150 yards at a publicly announced event and fired a shot that injured the former president's ear. The Secret Service has acknowledged a systematic breakdown in Butler, with Kimberly Cheadle resigning as the agency's chief just a day after taking heat from both parties on Capitol Hill.
You're full of today.
If you have an assassination attempt on a president, a former president, or a candidate, you need to resign.
Just days ago, the acting Secret Service director briefing lawmakers about the Pennsylvania attack after a bipartisan task force opened an investigation.
Are you confident that today Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are safe given their security details?
Well, we're working to help restore the confidence of the American people, and that's actually one of the things that this task force takes very seriously.
Now, the previous Secret Service director suggested the agency was working towards hiring an additional 1,500 personnel overall to meet its goal. The challenge for the agency, of course, is adding people without lowering standards, as the acting director pointed out in recent testimony. It's a very competitive application with a low pass rate. But the acting director says they've been focusing on measures to try to help with retention. We also know now that the congressional task force looking into the Pennsylvania shooting has also requested a Secret Service briefing on what happened in Florida, so likely more to come on all of this. Back to you.
All right, Hallie, thanks so much.
Let's stick with news around the 2024 election and look at the dangers of misinformation.
Yeah, years after we started talking about fake news, misinformation is becoming more widespread, more sophisticated, in part due to artificial intelligence, making it harder than ever to identify what's real out there.
One organization that is helping people try and tell fact from fiction before they place their ballots is the nonpartisan nonprofit News Literacy Project. And we are joined now by the Senior Vice President of Research and Design of that organization, Peter Adams. Good to have you with us, Peter. This is always an important conversation. It feels especially important right now. First, just give us a little bit of the basics, what the News Literacy Project is and how you are keeping track of the mis- and disinformation.
Sure, it's good to be with you. The News Literacy Project is a nonpartisan education nonprofit that provides both resources and training for educators all across the country to help their students navigate today's information environment. It's incredibly complex, the most complex in human history. So we really need to update our efforts on that front and try to, make sure that every student is skilled in news literacy by the time they graduate high school. Part of our efforts this year around the election, because we know mis and disinformation tends to really spike during election years, its impact is very heightened. We launched a misinformation dashboard to help people keep track of both the themes or the topics, as well as the tactics that people are using online to spread falsehoods.
Hey, Peter, can you walk us through some examples of those falsehoods that you've been seeing and some of those themes we should know about?
Sure. We've seen a kind of spate of fake celebrity endorsements, for example, folks who have doctored a photo of a celebrity to put a political message on a T-shirt. Lots of examples of just simple tricks of context, people's words taken out of context, video clips taken out of context, and things like that. Most of them are focused on attacking a candidate's image or supporting a candidate's image to appeal to their base. Others are, pushing conspiratorial narratives or narratives about a candidate's popularity.
Let's talk about conspiracy. We saw this example of the dangers of misinformation last week during the presidential debate when former President Trump repeated these baseless claims about immigrants eating and abusing pets in Ohio. And those things have just exploded from there. Talk to us about how damaging misinformation like this can be. It's a real world example right now.
It is, and it's a really good example of the stakes of what we all post and share online. This rumor, that rumor in particular about pets in Springfield started in a closed Facebook group. This latest iteration of someone posted that they had heard from a neighbor who had heard from someone who's heard from someone else that this was happening in Springfield, and then it rocketed around the internet and became very widespread, and then eventually was repeated during the presidential debate. As you mentioned, and I think it just underscores the stakes. It can feel really easy when you're online, when you're on Facebook or social media, to like or share something that feels true, that seems alarming, that you think other people might need to know, but it can have really severe real-world consequences. We've seen bomb threats and school closures in Springfield partially as a result of this.
Peter, last month, the Facebook parent released its latest report into adversarial threats. It warned that artificial intelligence could be used to supercharge disinformation campaigns. Explain for us how AI can supercharge fake stuff, fake information, and how people can protect themselves and make sure you're not being misled.
It is a significant threat that this technology has matured really rapidly. I think generated images, AI-generated images are approaching photorealistic quality. So what we're accustomed to seeing a photo, we think, well, it's probably true if I can't tell if it's doctored. This adds another layer of complexity to that. And we're also seeing AI-generated video tools mature very rapidly as well. So our standards for what counts as visual evidence, especially online, need to change. I think people just need to add an extra degree of skepticism when they see an outrageous or sensational visual, and make sure that they're getting their information, especially their news, from standards-based sources that do take steps to confirm the authenticity of images and video before they publish them.
Incredibly important advice. Peter Adams, thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
It's good to be with you.
Coming up, a college football quarterback with almost impossibly large shoes to fill.
That's right. After the break, the highly heralded son of one NFL great who stunned Texas fans over the weekend with an audible appearance that nobody could have seen coming. That's next. Stay with us. We're we're back with some financial headlines, including a major deal that should come as good news for football fans.
NBC's Savannah Hanau has that and some other money headlines. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Christine. Good morning. Yeah, well, Monday Night Football fans can breathe a sigh of relief. The Disney blackout on DirecTV is over. The two sides announced a truce on Saturday that restored ESPN, ABC, FX, Disney Channel, and other Disney networks to DirecTV's lineup after a nearly 2-week hiatus. And it all came ahead of a full day of college football on Saturday and Sunday's Emmy Awards. DirecTV says both parties are now working to finalize a new multi-year contract. Home Depot agreed to pay $2 million in a settlement accusing the retailer of overcharging customers. The complaint accused Home Depot of so-called scanner violations. So basically bringing up items as more expensive than was written on the shelf tag or on the item itself. The company admitted no wrongdoing in the settlement, but will have to implement a price accuracy program as a result. The penalty is unlikely to have any real impact on the country's 5th largest retailer, which is valued at $377 billion. And after 2 years of testing, Chipotle will start using 2 new robots to make food in 2 California restaurants. The Avocado robot, as its name would suggest, preps and peels avocados, while the augmented make line robot builds bowls and salads, while employees assemble burritos, tacos, and quesadillas. The company invested in the makers of both products through its venture fund, so it has a stake in seeing the tech succeed beyond just faster service, guys.
Avocado, that's clever.
Avocado.
That's clever.
Avocado.
Silvano, thank you so much. Welcome back. Stargazers will be treated to a celestial show tomorrow night. That's because the full moon will coincide with a partial lunar eclipse, giving millions the chance to see part of the moon's surface that's often obscured by Earth's shadow. That's not all. The full moon will also be a supermoon, meaning the moon will appear to be bigger and brighter than usual. The partial lunar eclipse will begin tomorrow night at 8:41 Eastern, with the eclipse peaking at around 10:44. It's far out, literally far out.
I'm glad someone keeps track of all that.
All right.
The partial and the super and everything else. It'll be cool. All right. Let's end this hour with television's Night to Shine. The 76th Primetime Emmy Awards took place last night in L.A. with lots of big stars and plenty of nostalgia, too. NBC News correspondent Kaylee Hartung has all the highlights.
Hey there. I think co-host Dan Levy said it best when he described the night as broadcast TV's biggest night for honoring movie stars on streaming services. And the jokes kept coming, along with reunions, surprises, and history for the year's breakout hit Shogun.
And the Emmy goes to Shogun.
Television's biggest night, a showstopper for Shogun, raking in a record 18 Emmys in a single season, including Outstanding Drama Series and a sweep of the top acting awards.
Shogun taught me that when people work together, we can make miracle. We can create a better future together.
Shogun's lead actress, Anna Sawai, becoming the first actress of Asian descent to win the category.
This is to all the women who expect nothing and continue to be an example.
But it was the comedies that brought the biggest shocker, with Hacks pulling off a surprise win for Outstanding Comedy over The Bear, and Jean Smart taking home the genre's lead actress Emmy.
I appreciate this because I just don't get enough attention.
Still, The Bear was able to cook up some major wins. Jeremy Allen White served his second straight Emmy for lead actor in a comedy.
This show has changed my life.
His castmate Liza Colón-Zayas making history as the first Latina named Outstanding Supporting Actress in a comedy.
How could I have thought it would be possible to be in the presence of Meryl Streep and Carol Burnett?
The night paying tribute to nostalgic TV shows of yesteryear, reuniting the stars of Happy Days, Ron Howard and Henry Winkler, and The West Wing. All with the father-son duo, Eugene and Dan Levy, acting as host.
My most rewarding dad role ever has been being your dad. In Schitt's Creek. Because it got me my first acting Emmy.
Yeah. The limited series category, a runaway for Baby Reindeer with 6 wins. The show's creator and star, Richard Gadd, delivering a moving speech.
So if you're struggling, keep going, and I promise you things will be okay.
And speaking of reunions, how about a surprise appearance by some of our favorites from Paris? Olympic medal winners Steven Nedorosik, Alona Mar, and Caleb Dressel, along with Paralympic champion Ezra French. They were on stage to help present Best Director for a Drama alongside Jane Lynch and Brendan Hunt, a pair of TV coaches. And another big win went to two-time Oscar winner Jodie Foster, grabbing her first ever Emmy for her role in True Detective Night Country. A standing ovation for her. Back to you.
I didn't know that was her first Emmy. Very cool. All right, Kaylee, thank you. It's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.